for joining us. Thanks. So you folks know, I think everyone here has a seat already, but this is all seating too. Should you need, should you have any friends coming in a couple minutes, you can let them know. Hi, I'm Claire Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple Books here in the city. And tonight, I'm delighted to welcome back to the Bay Area A.H. Kim for the release of her book, Relative Strangers. She is joined tonight by Dominic Lim. Let's give a hand for Dominic as well. I'm really glad to have you back in the Bay, and all your friends came out, and we get to be a part of it. So thank you for including Green Apple on the Relative Strangers tour and its journey. And thank you all for coming out and joining us here. Thank you for joining us both in person here and also online. Hello, online audience. There's a camera next to Anne here. That's what I'm waving at. Thank you for joining us both in person and online. We are broadcasting from San Francisco, California. We are on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land, and we hope that you join us in our pledge to turn land acknowledgement into action by donating either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. If you're curious about that, we have a QR code at our back desk that will take you right to the Ramaytush Ohlone Land Trust website, where you can learn more about how to participate in this project of rematriation. Very brief business before I let these two take over. Now's a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. I would say picture taking is encouraged, but don't take a call in the middle of the event. Please do check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us, including the event that you are currently attending. So if you like literary events such as the one that you are at right now, you might like what else we have going on in the near future. The restroom is behind me. It is available after the event and not during the event for obvious reasons. If you need to know how to get there, please let me know and I'll gladly help you. We have copies of books by both of our authors at the front register. You can find them there. And if you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you also support the authors who put so much work into writing these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. Thank you so kindly. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two authors who are joining us tonight. First, Dominic Lim's debut novel, All the Right Notes, was named a 2023 Best Book by USA Today, Harper's Bazaar, Library Journal, Entertainment Weekly, among others. He is a member of the Writer's Grotto. Cold for applause, Writer's Grotto. And is a co-host of the long-running Babylon Salon Reading and Performance Series in San Francisco. He holds a Master of Music from Indiana University Jacobs School of Music and is an alum of Oberlin College and Conservatory of Music, and has sung with numerous professional early music and choral ensembles. As a proud member of the Actors Equity Association, he's performed off-Broadway and in regional productions throughout the U.S., and his second novel, Karaoke Queen, will be published in September of this year. Let's give another hand for Dominic. Thank you. He'll be joining us in just a moment. Last but most certainly not least, A.H. Kim, or Anne, was born in Seoul, South Korea, and immigrated to the U.S. as a young child. Anne was educated at Harvard College and Berkeley Law School, where she was an editor of the California Law Review. She practiced corporate law for many years and served as chief of staff to the CEO and as head of investor relations at a Fortune 200 company. Anne is the proud member of two sons, a longtime cancer survivor, community volunteer. After raising her family in the Bay Area, Anne and her husband now call Ann Arbor home, but she's back here tonight. She is the author of the novel A Good Family, and her most recent novel, Relative Strangers, is the reason we are here tonight. Let's give another hand for A.H.
Thank you, Car. Car is one of the most supportive booksellers in the entire Bay Area, so please, thank you so much for having me. And thank you to Anne. May I call you Anne, not
No,
A-H?
call me A.H.
For having me be a part of this event. I am tickled pink and purple to be a part of this. We are members. I met Anne at the Writer's Grotto before she moved to Ann Arbor, and she was such a supportive member there. And I remember, I think we met first hear in real life. It
Yes.
was at Jenny Bittner's reading for her
And
her
you
novel.
sang at it.
Did I? I don't remember.
Would you belt a song right now?
Yeah, so, and I remember asking you, because your book had just come out, your first book, and I said, are you working on your second? You said, oh, it's done. Like, it's ready to come out. And that was years ago, and now it's finally out. So, so that all of us can have a taste of what I was able to read, and I think some of you have already read, but probably not most of you. Why don't you share a little bit of Relative Strangers with us?
Okay. I know a lot of people don't go to readings and they say, is it all about reading? And I'm like, no, that would be the most boring event ever. Let me just drone on and on to you. So I don't even like to read a little bit, but I'll just give you a little flavor for what the book is about. And it's kind of fitting given this setting. Thank you for being part of this very special day. Looking around at all your faces, I see old friends, new friends, even a few people I don't know yet, but I am sure will become friends. And of course, I see the three women who are the most important people in my life. My mother, Tabitha, my sister, Eleanor, and my niece, Maggie. Today's celebration is about you, about us, about the next chapter in our family's history. Today's celebration is also about this place, this wild, wind-blown miracle of a place. When I first arrived here 15 months ago, I was lost in every sense of the word. I had no idea Arcadia even existed. Today, there's no place on earth I'd rather be. A cancer retreat center seems like an unlikely venue for a wedding, but I can't think of a more perfect spot. If there's one thing I've learned this past year, it's this. Sometimes you find beauty in the most unexpected places, and sometimes you find love with the most unexpected people.
So for those of you who haven't read the book, you'll find out a lot more about what that letter means, who's actually reading it, what the circumstances are. But one thing that you can know from the outset is that it was it drew its inspiration from Jane Austen, namely the first book, Sense and Sensibility. So can you tell us a little bit about your relationship to Jane Austen? Are you a recent convert? Have you always read her books, or did you discover her stories through the adaptations on film or TV first?
Yeah. So I had an older brother, and I admired him so much, and so I would read all the books that he read. And he never read Jane Austen, as many men tend not to read Jane Austen. And so I had this impression that Jane Austen was kind of like a bodice ripper or like romance. And I was like, oh, I'm too sophisticated to read that kind of stuff. And even I have a college friend here in the front row, and I think you were an English major. But anyway, even in college, when people were reading Jane Austen, I knew it wasn't a bodice ripper. For some reason, I never read her. And so it wasn't until 1995 when there was like all these Jane Austen adaptations that came out on film. So there was the BBC production of Pride and Prejudice, the one with Colin Firth with the wet shirt, very famous. And there was the 1995 Ang Lee production of Sense and Sensibility with Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet. And that's actually, my book is more based on the movie in some ways than it is on the book, because I loved that movie so much. So my first book was actually this one, A Good Family. And I wrote it and tried to find an agent for it and was not able to find an agent. And so I was feeling pretty miserable about kind of just, my state of affairs. And so to comfort myself, I was sitting there watching a movie, Sense and Sensibility, and I was having my ice cream and, like sobbing into my cups. And I was thinking, what should I do? I should probably work on my next book, but what should I write? I look up at the screen, the angels sing, the clouds part, and I was like, oh, I'm going to write a Sense and Sensibility book. So it was really based on the movie that
Okay.
I was inspired to write this book.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm a romance writer, and I'm a horrible romance writer because I haven't read any Jane Austen, so blacklisted at many festivals.
Just so you know, I've read his book. He is not a horrible romance writer. He's an excellent romance writer.
Thank you. So not only is your book inspired by Jane Austen, Sense and Sensibility, there are a lot of different things in it, like pop culture references, which we'll get into. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about your book was all the food details. There's a lot of, don't ever read this book on an empty stomach, because you will be grasping for some food, but there were so many just amazing food details in it. So I'm curious to know where that came from. Is that, do you have a foodie background? Do you like to cook, or are you a good?
By foodie background, does that mean like I like to eat? Yes, yeah. I like to eat. And I think it comes from my mom was a great cook, and so I always grew up with a lot of great food. And then, of course, when I lived in the Bay Area, the food here is so fantastic. I mean, literally, I'm like, I'm only here for a day and a half. And I'm just like, how many meals can I sneak in? And I had lunch at Burma Superstar, and I had, the tea leaf salad. I had the curry beef. And I was thinking, this is really filling. I can't have another meal today. And I'm just like, oh no, but how am I going to get my dim sum and my, banh mi's? And we just had tacos across the street. So if you consider like eating a lot to be a foodie, then I am definitely a foodie. But like I was describing earlier, I started writing this book because I couldn't get an agent for my first book. So I like to say this was my comfort write. I had a comforting story, and I just filled it with all the things that give me comfort. So food, pop culture, love.
Yeah, and you can tell reading this book, I often read this book in bed, under the covers, because it was just that warm feeling you get when you read a book that just fills you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, a friend of mine read the book, and she said it felt like a warm hug.
Yes, that is it. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah. So you mentioned the pop culture references, of which there are many.
Yeah.
I mean, everything from...
I actually edited out like 50% of them. I mean, it used to be like every page had 10, inside jokes about movies or music and I think it was my agent actually was like, you have to take some of those out.
How did you start with a list of things you definitely wanted to put in, or as you wrote, just everything was...
Yeah, so in the book, it's a sister story. So it's two sisters, and they have a lot of inside jokes. So they're kind of like always exchanging like movie lines or inside jokes with one another. And that's how I grew up. My brother, like talking about my brother, he and I always had inside jokes. Mm-hmm. And then when my sister came along, we had inside jokes. So like it got to the point where we had so many inside jokes, we'd be like, wait, is that an original line, or is that a line from a movie? And we would always be, questioning each other. So I gave them that relationship in the book as well. Yeah. And then there were just too many allusions. I had to cut them out.
I mean, it wasn't just TV shows and movies. It was musicals and books and songs. And
I was talking with my friend back there, and she was like, I love the line where you say like, wait, this sounds like a line from Penthouse, back in the days before people got porn online. And I was just like, I wonder if like the millennial generation will get that joke. But I knew like this generation, my generation would get that.
And I did appreciate that. I read another book recently that was similar. There was a lot of help, but clearly the author was in his 20s. I mean, everything was just like...
Yeah.
I mean, I got Taylor Swift, and that was about it. But that's the great thing about... I mean, if of a certain age, like, you'll get all of them.
What's really kind of disturbing to me is I have friends who write stories set in the 80s or 90s. Yeah. And they are put into the historical fiction section of the 80s and 90s is historical fiction. That really hurts. Yeah.
That is the official categorization.
Yeah. which means we are historical
We are-
fiction.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot the main setting of the book is a place called Arcadia. By the way, is that a real place? No.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So actually, like you might have heard, I was getting a little choked up when I was reading it, because Arcadia is based on on a real place called Commonweal, and it's a cancer retreat center here in Northern California, where I've spent many weeks, both as a guest and also kind of as a facilitator. And I have friends here from my cancer community. So one of the things I say is that this is a love letter to all of my friends that I've lost through cancer. So there are characters, I mean, not the main characters, but some of the secondary characters, who I'm honoring those friends. So as I've been listening to the audiobook today, because I just got it through my Libby. I don't even get a free one. I have to get it from the library like everybody else. So I put my hold in, and I was fourth in line. And so finally I got it. It's like, oh, you're next up. And so I've been listening to it as I've been, eating. And, just hearing somebody else tell the story, even though I've written the words myself, it makes it, I don't know, it's weird. It's like it makes it more real, or it makes it feel separate a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting, I read about these characters, and I'm like, oh gosh, that was this friend of mine, and I'm like on the bus and I'm crying. People are like, what's wrong with that lady? So it's very much a real place.
And you can tell because those characters just feel so I was going to ask you if these were based on real characters, and because they feel so real. I mean, one could only assume that they were based on real people, but I think that as a testament to your ability to write, and to write something that is full of joy, because this really is a joyful book. It is not a book about, the sadness does not prevail throughout the book. I think what is so wonderful is that you were able to pay respect to these characters, and not all the characters have happy endings, as that is what cancer is, and yet it doesn't feel heavy. It feels respectful.
Right.
And as the story continues on, it's wonderful what you were able to do.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I think because it was my comfort, right? I think my first draft of it was really kind of light and fluffy, because kind of almost like a rom-com, or like a Meg Ryan movie or something like that. And that was fun to write, but it's also based at a cancer retreat center. The father dies at the beginning. And so it's the revision process that you go through. And then you want to really get into the heart of the characters. And you start to imagine what their backstories are, and what emotions they bring, what brought them to this cancer retreat center. And that's when you start to get the deeper nuances of the character. And again, I was sort of inspired by my own experience. The character of Amelia, who's the main narrator, is inspired by my younger sister. So I am the older sister in the family. I am the Eleanor, the responsible, reasonable, sensible one. And my sister is more dynamic, more kind of impetuous. Just as a little story, she was a very successful fashion editor in New York City. She was the director of accessories at InStyle magazine. So she would get sent to the Paris shows twice a year. She would get sent to the Milan shows twice a year. She went to the Met Gala and had ball gowns, sent to her. So she led that life, that Devil Wears Prada, super fancy life. And, meanwhile, I was raising my kids here in San Francisco. Not very fancy. And then she called me one day and she said, I've decided I'm going to quit my job and move to Nebraska. And I said, honey, you haven't even visited Nebraska. And she said, no, I'm sure that Nebraska is where my husband and my child are waiting for me. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is a big. So in the book, Amelia is not in fashion; she's in food, but she does the same thing where she has this very successful restaurant, and she decides to give it all up and just move to Mendocino. And Eleanor, her older sister's like, can you change your mind? Is it too late? Have you already broken your lease? That's very much based on that relationship that I had with my sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
It didn't even occur to me that, those people wonder, or actually they assume when fiction writers write a book that the main characters are them. And more than often than not, that's not the case, right? It is a part of us. But I didn't realize that it really is. Those two sisters are very much you and your sister.
Yeah, it is. And with my first book, A Good Family, it was based on my experience supporting my brother while his wife, my sister-in-law, pled guilty to a white-collar crime and went to prison. So that story was told in two perspectives. One is the Korean-American law librarian, who's very, rule-abiding and dutiful, not unlike me. And then the other is the sister-in-law who pleads guilty and goes to prison. And people say, well, of course, that dutiful law librarian is you. And that is true. That is me. But what surprises people is that the other character is also me. So, as a nice person, if people are mean to me, I don't say snarky things or lash out, but I want to, I have lots of snarky, mean things that I want to say, and I don't say them. But when you are writing a character, you get to let that all out. So I got to let that character say all the things that I've always repressed and let her lead that kind of out there life that I wasn't able to do myself. So similarly, well, kind of, in this book, I am not really like the main character, but I enjoyed sort of channeling that character. Mm-hmm. It would have been easier for me to write the book from the Eleanor perspective, because that is me. But, it's sort of interesting to imagine, why would somebody give up, a very nice life to take on a whole new challenge in their lives.
Yeah. In fact, when you start to read the book, the first impression you get of the main character is that they're a total screw up, total fuck up, right? And it's a surprise to find out later that they used to be very successful. They used to be very successful.
Well, I feel like women are sometimes really hard on themselves. Mm. And especially in a place like San Francisco, where everybody seems to be successful or wealthy or whatever, put your adjective there. And sometimes when my friends are kind of down on themselves, I say, what are you talking about? You're a great mom. You give back to the community. You're in great shape, or whatever the things are. But we sort of shortchange our achievements and our accomplishments, maybe because we're measuring ourselves against other people. But we all have different things that we're excellent at or that we are interested in. Mm-hmm. So I just felt like this was a woman who, yes, was very successful in many ways, but always sort of minimize her abilities or minimize her achievements.
Well, you treat actually and there are many characters in this book. It's not a simple, 2-3 character book. It's a big cast. So, and you treat them all with a lot of respect, because there's a lot of depth to every single one of them, even though some characters appear for just maybe 2 or 3 scenes. You definitely get a full picture of who that person is. So my hat's off to you. But are there characters or parts of the characters that you felt you had to cut? Because there's a lot. So are there any things any darlings you had to kill along the way? I'm curious.
The opposite, actually. There were not darlings that I had to kill, but my first book had some sex scenes in them. And I thought that, when you write a book, you want to put some spice in it, because that will make people want to read it. But my dad, who passed away this year, was so proud of my book. And so he would buy copies for all of his friends. And so at my dad's memorial service, there were all these 88-year-old Korean men who would come up to me and they would say, your dad sent me your book and I read it and I really enjoyed it. And I was just really the less lesbian sex scene. It was very cringy and awkward. Or like, my colleagues from work are here, and I was, active in some of the organizations there, and they would ask me to talk about my writing. And these people would come up to me afterwards, like these older men, and they'd say, "Is it a good book to give to my daughter? She's 14. No, not really. It's not smutty, but I don't know. I think I'm a little bit of a Puritan. So then when I wrote the first draft of Relative Strangers, I included some sex scenes as well, and again because I thought that sold books or something. But then as I kept revising it, I was just like, why am I putting myself in this position again where I'm just going to be cringing every time they say they read my book? So I took all the sex scenes out.
Okay.
So I didn't kill my darlings. I killed the sex scenes.
Something similar happened to my second book that's coming out. I was drafting it and I sent it to my editor, and like you, I thought, well, I need to include sex scenes because my first scene didn't really have major sex scenes, and the second one I was like, oh, they need something sexy, so I put them in, and I wasn't very happy with them, so I put a note on the side. I said, Alex, should we just get rid of this? She just put, yes, please, delete. I'm not very good at writing them, so.
Yeah, now, it's gotten to the point now where my mother-in-law has read my books. My son's girlfriends are reading the books. And so, the more I just keep it sort of PG-13, the better I'll be,
Yeah. So speaking of things we would like to be able to visualize from the book.
Or not.
How would you, I know not all of you have read it, but maybe this will give you an idea sort of what the book might be like. Who would you cast in your Relative Strangers, the movie?
Yeah.
Who are the main characters?
Yeah, so the two main characters are Amelia and Eleanor, and they are half Korean and half Caucasian. And that's partly because my children are mixed race as well. I'm Korean, my husband's Caucasian. And I feel like, there's a Toni Morrison quote about if there's a book that you want to read but it hasn't been written yet, then you should write it. And one of the reasons why I started writing is that I wanted to see myself in books. I had grown up as a child, going and looking. I remember going to the library to the K section to try to find a Kim author, because Kim is the very popular Korean last name. So if there's going to be a Korean author, they'll probably have a last name Kim, and there was never a Kim. And I remember always feeling so sad that I wasn't represented in stories. So that was part of my impetus for writing. And so then for the second book, I thought, well, I want to write books for people like my children. And many of my friends also are in mixed race relationships, and I feel like our books should reflect the world that we live in. So that means that the two main characters are half Korean and half white. And at the time that I was not maybe initially drafting the book, but revising the book, I was listening, like everybody else, to Hamilton constantly. I was listening to Hamilton. It was it was on a reel in my brain. So there's an actress called Philippa Sue.
Yeah.
Who plays Eliza, and she's just so
She's wonderful,
beautiful and talented, and she's got wit and savvy, and so she is my Amelia for sure. And then so her sister Eleanor is a little bit older than her, so I was trying to think of an actress who was also mixed race, and it's not quite right, but like Olivia Munn, I thought might be good for Eleanor.
the men.
Oh, so it's funny because I think he's gay. Matt Bomer.
He is gay.
Yeah, but I like him for Jet.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'd watch that movie.
yeah, I know. And the thing is, it doesn't matter what he is in real life. It's just he would be super hot for Jet. And then in the original, okay, this is a little bit of a spoiler. In the original Sense and Sensibility movie, the character of Willoughby, the heartbreaker, the cad, is played by Greg Wise.
That's right.
And he, little inside story, even though he plays kind of this young man who courts the younger sister, Kate Winslet, in real life, he ended up married to Emma Thompson, the older sister. So I would like Greg Wise to play the Brandon character.
Right.
Yeah. So I have a lot. I definitely have a dream cast.
Oh yeah.
And then the mother, I describe her as a cross between Goldie Hawn and Helen Mirren.
Yeah.
So I was thinking like, who would be a good
like
character?
trashy, classy.
A little bit too much Botox,
right.
maybe. Yeah, a little bit of blonde. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, but so anyway, I'm taking suggestions for the mom character. Yeah.
Okay, great. So before we got here, I was freaking out. By the way, I got here at like 5:59. I was like, "Oh my god, I'm late," because I thought it was at 6, and like it hadn't been set up yet. I was like, "What's going on? I'm in the wrong store." So anyway, you were over there with your friends from PG&E, who I met some of you, lovely people. And as you heard from Anne's bio, you know, she was a very successful attorney doing all these things. So for those of us in the audience who are considering a midlife career change, as I did, sort of, and you did, how did you navigate that change? Did you start writing? I'm assuming you started writing while you were working at PG&E, but where did that transition happen?
Yeah, people ask me like, "Oh, what inspired you to like give up writing? Give up being a lawyer to be a writer?" And I say, "That's not what happened." Because, you know, being a lawyer is stable and lucrative and all those things, and being a writer is not. You make really no money as a writer. So, like, why you would give up this job for that job, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I, as Eleanor, I'm a very sensible, rational person. I would not make that decision. So my writing and my legal work overlapped. I was working quite hard actually in my job. But like I said earlier, I was inspired to write, stories that reflected me or my world. I started doing that probably in my late 40s. And then I was so dumb. I said, I want to be published by the time I'm 50. That's going to be my goal. And so that was like 2.5 years, which is really ridiculous. Nobody like starts writing and becomes published in 2.5 years. And I missed my deadline by 5 years. I wasn't published until I was 55. But 7.5 years to go from like never having written a word to having a published novel, that's not bad.
Not bad.
So I did it in the evenings when the kids went to bed. I did it on the weekends when my kids were at swim meets. When we were on vacation, I did it while they were at the pool or whatever. And I wanted it so badly that I just made time for it.
Yeah.
And the hardest part really of the writing journey is to get an agent and somebody, because the agents are really the gatekeepers for the publishing industry. So that was the hardest part for me. And then, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I was 55 and I thought, life is too short. I got cancer when I was 39. And I thought, do I really want to work for the rest of my life? And there was an early retirement offer from my company, and I thought, I think this is a sign for me to retire. Ironically, since I retired 2 years ago, I haven't written a thing. Because I've been so busy, moving. I moved to a different town. I've been busy. My parents, both of my parents passed away, so taking care of them, taking care of their estate. So I just haven't had the time, bandwidth, or even emotional energy to write. So the book, both of these books that I have published, as well as like 2 books that aren't published, I wrote those while I was working full time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You make time for what's important to you.
Right. Yeah. That is the life of the writer. I mean, things come and go, and you have to just sort of fit the writing in where it fits.
Well, you're all. I mean, you still work your day job,
I still
and you have,
full-time job.
and you have 2 novels.
Yeah. Right.
So how do you do it?
A lot of coffee.
Yeah.
Not a lot of sleep.
Yeah.
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 Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you just do what you got to do.
Yeah.
There are a lot of writers here, actually, a lot of people from the Writers' Grotto. And you've been such an incredible part of many writing communities.
Yeah.
What have been some of your favorite communities and things you've been a part of? What have really defined you as a writer?
Yeah. So I've talked about this with some of my friends. I still have incredible imposter syndrome because, I wasn't an English major in college. I don't have an MFA. I don't have like a whole slew of stories that have been published in journals. I just happen to have written a novel that got published. So sometimes when people say, "Oh, you're a writer," I say, "Well, kind of." It's like, you have a published novel. You're a writer. So it's hard for me to embrace that. So I did join the Writers' Grotto partly just because I felt like that gave me some legitimacy. Like I belong to this group.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful, but of course I joined it right around the pandemic, so I wasn't able to get the full benefit of the group and its support and all, the community. But one of the things that Vanessa Hua said early on, I don't know, she was giving a talk and she said, be a good literary citizen.
Yeah.
That means going to other people's book events. She's the best.
Oh,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, go to other people's book events, buy their books, repost their social media stuff. And I thought, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like promoting myself. I don't like putting myself out there, but like if I can promote somebody else's books, I'm happy to do that. And so that really does sort of pay its rewards. I mean, I got to meet you. Most of the people that I am in conversation with during my tour are people that I've supported or I've met through communities. Yeah. So in addition to the community here that I made, when I moved to Ann Arbor, I didn't know anybody. I had 0 friends. So I just started literally just contacting people on Instagram, like, oh, you live in Ann Arbor? Do you want to go out for coffee? And just, people were kind of taken aback by that. Who's this woman who's contacting me? But once I found some writers, I said, oh, is there a writing community like the Writers' Grotto in Ann Arbor? They have a great MFA program. They have, some great bookstores, but nobody seemed to know of a writing community. So I said, well, I'll start one. And so with all these different people I was randomly meeting on the internet, I just got us on a big Google group and, so we try to get together periodically. So that's been a great group. And then because I debuted in 2020, many of my fellow authors who debuted in 2020, it was not a good time to have your book come out. And so we have a Facebook group for 2020 debuts, which initially, formed in 2018 or 2019. And we were just talking about just what are your plans for a book tour? How do you find a conversation partner or things like that? And very quickly in early 2020, it was like, oh shit, all my events are getting canceled. Does anybody know what this Zoom thing is or this Instagram Live thing is? And oh shoot, I have a online interview, but I need an interview partner. And so, I have a friend here from that group. We really became like a support group for one another. Yeah. And so when we needed a conversation partner or some support for an event, we all showed up for one another. Yeah.
So before we switch over to questions from the audience, you mentioned you have 2 books that you have already written that are waiting. Can you tell us anything about what they're? Is any of them a romance?
No. So actually, the first one probably will never see the light of day. Okay. The first one was the first book that I ever wrote, and it was inspired. So that was the book that I wrote in my late 40s. I was on vacation in San Diego with my kids. I brought the book "The Fault in Our Stars" by John Green. It's a YA book. And, it's about first love and that raw emotion that you have when you first meet somebody and fall in love. And by the end of the book, I was just sobbing, and I thought, I love this book so much, and I want to read a story like this, but from a Korean American perspective. And so I said, okay, I'm going to write that book. And I wrote that book, and I kind of poured my heart out on the page. It took me about a year and a half to write. Then I shared it with some of my friends who said, oh, this is such a good book. You should try to get it published. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, okay, that sounds good. And then I started the querying process and everything. And, it's like, it's the worst process in the world. It really is. It's so humiliating because, like you said, you take such effort to tailor your email to a person, say, like, I really admire you. I've read books that you represent, and I think that my book would be a really good fit for you. And they don't even bother to, like, reject you. They just ignore you. So then you just get silence. And so that was difficult. And then by the end of it, I kind of had my, like, Scarlett O'Hara moment of, like, as God is my witness, I will write a bestseller and all of you will rue the day you never took me as a client. And so that's when I wrote my next book, A Good Family, which is why I put all the sex scenes in, and then since writing Relative Strangers, I've written yet another book, which kind of is a return to kind of the darker flavor of A Good Family. So it's not as kind of light and romancy as Relative Strangers. And it's about a toxic work environment. It's about many things, but primarily a toxic work environment. So PG&E people.
Totally fiction.
Yeah, totally fiction. So that book is kind of waiting in the wings because it needs a lot of editing. And obviously while I'm doing this promotion, I can't do the editing, but that's the next thing I'm going to turn to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what questions have you guys been sitting on since we've started talking? Anyone? Yes.
So, Anne, how did you actually then, through this arduous process, find your agent? How did that connection happen?
Yes. How did Anne find her agent?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I would say for aspiring authors out there, the way I really like to find agents is to read books that are similar to the book that you wrote, that you really enjoy, and go to the acknowledgement section. It's like listening to the Oscars or something, and they always thank their agent. So, you circle those people, and then that way if you don't have a personal in with them, at least you can say, I read this book and you represented them, and I really admire that book, and I think my book would be a similar fit. So that's how I sort of started to compile the list of the agents that I would seek out. And one of the agents who showed up was this man named Kirby Kim, my last name. So I played the Korean card, and I said, "Hey, Kirby," like I didn't say like 안녕하세요 or anything, but I said, I'm Korean, and he is a lawyer, and I said, I'm also a lawyer. He's also from he was from San Francisco, so I pointed out all the commonalities that we had, and then I pitched my book to him. And he turned me down. But like I was saying, the really awful part is that oftentimes you get no answer at all. So the fact that he sent me a rejection was, I was dancing around my living room, like, I got a rejection, So I just sort of kept him in the back of my mind as like, he's a good guy. He's a real person who will respond to your email. So then anyway, that was from my YA book that went nowhere. And then when I was querying for my first book, A Good Family, I wanted to go back to him. I was a little bit embarrassed, like, hey, it's me again, Korean, remember? But he had kind of changed his, every agent has different requirements for what they want. Some people want like a query letter plus the first 10 pages, a query letter plus the first chapter, a query letter plus like a synopsis, and he wanted a synopsis, and I thought, worst synopses are the worst because it basically gives you a high level summary of the whole book. But my book is like a mystery, so it's like you don't want to reveal who done it. But so I was like, okay, I'm not going to query him because he requires a synopsis, and I just don't want to do any more work for this book. And then I had. Oh, this is being recorded. Oh, shoot. Then I had a really bad day at work. And I was just like, oh, I need a plan B in my life. I need to get, I need to get out of here. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write a synopsis. So I wrote that synopsis and I sent it off to him. And that afternoon he said, can I see your full manuscript? Wow. So, yeah. It was the bad day turned into a pretty good day eventually. Yeah. Yeah. Are you writing a book, Benny?
I'm trying to get tips now on how to do this. Skip the arduous part.
So I have to tell you that I had a very tiny wedding of like just immediate family, maybe 15 people, and I never had like a big gathering of my friends. And so as I look out at this crowd, I see my friend Benny, who is a childhood friend of mine. I see college friends. I see people from 2020 debuts. I see Writers Grotto. I see the parents of my kids' friends from elementary school. I see my cancer community. I even see a friend from Ann Arbor. Did I get everybody? Anyway.
Your husband?
Not here. Yeah. Did I mention PG&E? Anyway. My work friends. Yeah. Did I not say that? Oh, I've been bad mouthing my company. Yeah. No, I love PG&E. They're great. Yeah. And so it's so wonderful here to see all of your faces and to this is like my little wedding that I never had.
How long did it take you to write the first draft of Relative Strangers? It sounds like the process was very different from The Good Family. It almost sounds like it kind of just flowed out.
Yeah.
How long? So this is for the video. How long did it take to write this book? Yeah.
The book actually wrote itself pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Part of it is that I already have the plot. I kind of cheated. Like with The Good Family, for those of you who've read it, it's kind of like a whodunit, and it's told in alternating perspectives, and it's also told with sort of present day and flashback. So it was like a puzzle that I had to spend a lot of time kind of weaving all the little pieces and figuring out where do you put all the little pieces. So it took, it took a year to draft, but it probably took a year or two to revise. Sense and Sensibility, or the Relative Strangers, I just used the Sense and Sensibility outline, but that allowed me to spend more time just thinking about the characters because I had to update the characters. So what I did was I sort of did this like little writing exercise where I took all of the characters in Sense and Sensibility, and then I kind of came up with their analogs in my book, like their names and a little bit of their background. And then once I did that, I had each of them introduce themselves, kind of like those corporate mixers or something like that. It's like, hi, my name is Amelia. I used to be the muse of a chef in New York City. And so she describes herself and her background as well as her voice. You could get her voice from it. And so after I had done that with all of the main characters in the book, it was pretty easy to write the actual book itself because I felt like I knew all the characters and I already knew sort of the arc of the story.
Okay, time for one more question.
Yeah.
Did your sister ever go to Nebraska?
Did Anne's sister go to Nebraska?
So the funny thing is, I said, don't, you have a great job, you have a great apartment, you have a life that people literally would kill for, and you're going to throw it all away and move to Nebraska where you know nobody. And she said, nope, my husband and my child are waiting for me. So she moved, and fast forward 15 years, She has a husband and a child, and she's very, very happy in Nebraska.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your next book. If not, I'll take it. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Carter, do you want to come up and
Yeah, sure.
talk us out?
I do. That's part of the plan.
Can we get one more hand for Anne?
Dominic, thank you for your time and consideration in reading Anne's book closely and coming up with these questions that brought us all in. And thank you for writing this book and sharing it with the world and us here. Thank you all for being here. I'm just going to let you know that we have copies of both of our authors' books at the front register. You can find them there. I'm going to have Anne at the back desk signing books, where my colleague Brendan is. The one waiting. If you have any other questions, let us know. And if not, we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Oh, wait, can I take a picture of the crowd?
Yes.
With your book?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, let me see if I can do it.
Oh, good.